Good evening and welcome everybody to the Digi-Cluster April meetup. Hooray! It's quite difficult to do that. Much feedback. But we have a small audience in the clock studio at the old schoolhouse, so we're going to feed off that and make sure we have an entertainment evening for you. So it is a beautiful day, a perfect evening to spend inside at an online event. So I do appreciate you turning up and making the effort, but it will be worth it. And we've got a great lineup for you. The theme tonight is green shoots. And physically, metaphorically, and literally, they are appearing on the trees. It's been a challenging time, as we know, for many of us. But I know a lot of the digital agencies and a lot of our team and a lot of our group in the Digi-Cluster group, in the Digi-Cluster community, are actually doing busier than ever. And in fact, I know that the team at Clock, in fact, we've signed a deal this week that has been 5 years in the making. Stuff is starting to happen, and I don't think we've ever been busier. So I'm hoping many of you are the same and that you are thriving on the way out of lockdown. So as you can see, we're on the Remo platform again this evening. So yeah, you've already been double clicking and sharing and moving around to other tables. You've also got the chat, which you can join in. And when we have our main speaker later on, feel free to add questions to the Q&A. And remember, you can vote those up. You can't vote them down, which is just nice Remo, I guess. Yeah, it's should be a fun evening. So let's take you through the brilliant Lucy is going to be pressing all the buttons tonight. So bear with us. We also have a slight challenge where Patrick, who's our speaker this evening, is in the same room as me. So I'm going to have to try and mute at the same time and turn things down. Otherwise, we'll get some feedback. But bear with us if that does happen. Cool. So as I said, we're going to have we've got two 90-second pitches. Lee Keogh from the Chamber and Emma Cameron from VWV, our brilliant sponsors. We're going to be doing their 90-second pitches. We have our Kickstarters from Clock, who are going to be talking about Digi-Cluster Prime. So some changes that we're looking to introduce and would love your feedback on. And talking about the office space we have available. This is one of their first presentations, so please support them and give them all the assistance and support that you can. But our main speaker this evening is the brilliant Patrick Welford, who I've met a year and a half ago, introduced through a very good friend who said he's the best creative he's ever worked with, which is saying a lot from Graham. And he's going to be talking about social media and coming back to life after some challenging times. And of course, we are going to be ordering some beers and pizzas. I think a number of you have hopefully been, if you've registered in time, you've been sent a voucher, which is much appreciated. Thank you for sorting that, Lucy and the team. If not, before Patrick's talk, we're going to give you a chance to order your beers and pizzas, well, pizzas probably, in time for when Patrick finishes for our networking afterwards. So, without further ado, Lee, I'm hoping, is ready to come to the stage. Our 90-second pitch, let me just get my notes 1 second. Why does that say there's no notes? I did Lee's slide. Lee, I usually read some stuff out from your LinkedIn, but I don't have that to hand now, so I'm not going to delay things too much further. Oh no, here it is. Yeah, so here's LinkedIn says, hi there, currently I have big dreams in the editor in the film and TV industry. I've already established my speciality. I'm hoping to build a portfolio of work to become a freelance editor. I work with clients on projects. And he's also a team leader, a brilliant team leader at the Watford and West Herts Chamber of Commerce, and heads up his team of Kickstarters. And for the first of our 90 seconds pitch, please give a welcome to the stage, Lee Keogh. All right, I just need to leave. All yours.
So, hi everyone. Like Sid said, I am the team leader apprentice at the Watford Chamber of Commerce. So I'm here to talk to you today about the Kickstart scheme, which is a great scheme for young people between the ages of 16 and 24. And what I really want to speak to you about right now is all about what's been going on at the chamber and how you can register your interest for the Kickstart scheme. So we have 9 Kickstarters, sorry, at the chamber at the moment. Innes is a great advocate for Kickstart and has helped literally propel the Kickstart scheme into being a bigger thing at the chamber. Neve has helped to run some great Microsoft workshops. Emma put on a great psychology of marketing event. Rebecca did a speed networking event. Bronwyn started off not knowing what she wanted to do and is our first Kickstarter to leave with a brand new job, and I could not be more proud. Harry is great at database cleansing and has cleansed our database at the chamber to be a much better database. Sam is great at 3D animation, and even our newest Kickstarters, Saul, Millie and Rita, are already starting off. So in my final 15 seconds, what I want to say is these are all young people with all talented skills. So please come along, register your vacancy, and you'll get an invite to the Kickstarter job shop, where you can get them vacancies filled. Thank you, Sid.
Appreciated, and yeah, I can only vouch 100% for the Kickstarter scheme. It's amazing. The talent that's out there that's going to be absolutely shocking. So yeah, if you haven't already, please do get involved, and you won't regret it. Okay, so our next. Sorry, I need 3 screens actually. So I've got my screen I'm sharing, which I'm going to do over here, but I also need this one here so I can see my notes and what I've written. I should have printed some stuff out, but we don't want to do that. That's not good for the planet. Right, our next 90 seconds pitch is from the brilliant Emma Cameron. Her LinkedIn says, "Hi there." No, that's not the. How did that happen? If you saw my screen, Emma's LinkedIn, Emma specializes in all areas of corporate finance and acts for businesses, banks, and high net worth individuals on share and business acquisitions and sales, with a particular focus on the technology sector. She also advises on joint ventures, shareholder arrangements, fundraisings, and share schemes. I also am today that she's an incredibly excellent and brilliant lawyer and a lovely human being. So please welcome Emma Cameron to the stage.
Oh, sorry, that's me. Okay. Is that me back?
You are indeed.
Okay. I'm very sorry, everyone. My screen just went absolutely blank. So obviously, I was. It was someone telling me I should shut up because we were particularly interested.
No problem. You've only got like 4 seconds left, Emma. No, I'm joking. No.
I'll be very brief. All I was going to say is we do a wide range of services, but actually why we're here tonight is because Samantha here and I all deal with businesses in the tech sector, which for us includes the digital and creative industries, and the work that we do for that sector involves mostly what we call corporate commercial work. So things like commercial contracts, intellectual property, business acquisitions and sales and so on. So if you do want to sort of find out a bit more about what we do in the sector, then please feel free to ask any of us any questions later on. So that was all I was going to cover. And sorry about the IT issues.
No problem. And thank you so much, Emma. It's always lovely to see you. And thanks again for your support on the sponsorship. It's really much appreciated. And helps us get beers and pizzas. Marvelous. Okay. Right. So Emma, if you just want to unclick your camera and microphone now, and then we will progress with our next section. Okay, Lucy, are you all ready?
Yeah.
Good. Okay, as I was mentioning earlier, our brilliant team of Kickstarters at Clock, George, Georgia, Hannah, Jade and Josh, which is a tongue twister we've all got better at. I'm going to talk to you about Digi-Cluster Prime. So I'm going to mute, but I'm going to press, if you want to say next slide, please, whenever you're ready, and I will do the next slide for you.
Hi everyone, we're introducing Digi-Cluster Prime. We are from the Digi-Cluster team and we've been working on developing a co-working space available for local professionals. Next slide. We've set up a co-working space for like-minded digital, creative and technology professionals. Whether you need to work 1, 3 or 5 days a week, we can offer you a desk. The result would be a creative and tech hub where you can have the opportunity to learn from one another, build a community and collaborate. And our office is based in Kings Langley. Next slide.
So what are the benefits of using a co-working space? First point, thank you. Firstly, flexible working. You can choose your working hours and when you want to work from home or in office. From a business owner or an employer's perspective, office building leases can be long-term binding and restrictive, while co-working memberships are more easily cancelled. Also, working with other people gives you the opportunity to network and connect with more people that you otherwise may not have met. Another benefit of working alongside other people is a community feeling that you get. Working from home alone can lead to burnout and disconnection and leave you feeling lonely. The community aspect of co-working boosts motivation and keeps your work social. Another benefit of using co-working spaces is cost efficiency. Renting an office space for your employees can be costly, and as an employee, it can be less expensive to use a co-working space than travelling to the company office, particularly if you're working.
The additional benefit of co-working spaces includes fewer distractions. Remote working has been difficult for many of us. It's easy to get distracted by our home environment. The kids need attention, the house needs to be cleaned, and special projects can constantly pop up in our minds. By going to another space, you can solidify work mode that can increase productivity and motivation. Right. This leads into another benefit, which is providing structure to your work life. By getting into a routine of going into an office space, it allows for you to get out of the house and into a collaborative work environment. Co-working spaces are literally designed to encourage creativity, productivity, and effective working habits, therefore it benefits you both socially and professionally. This leads us nicely into who can use these types of spaces. Co-working space has a diverse following and has emerged as the best solution to accommodate larger numbers of professionals with different demands, all under one roof. Sorry. As we know, the way we work has changed and is set to remain flexible in the future. Therefore, we have accommodated to these changing needs of workers. Whether you're a small business owner, a freelancer, or someone who fancies a change from their home office, you can pop into our offices and use our fantastic range of services and amenities.
So, what does Digi-Cluster Prime offer? We have a range of services, including monthly events. So each month we'll try to organise fun and exciting events for our members. We offer mentoring. You'll be surrounded by like-minded people within the digital and creative world, being able to learn from what everyone has to offer. It's a key idea that we want to push with our collaborative workspace. You have a support network. Digi-Cluster Prime members will be able to network with each other, giving you the opportunity to collaborate with some people from different backgrounds that you may not have otherwise met. This allows for a wealth of knowledge not easily found when working from home. We also offer a community WhatsApp channel with the Prime members. So this hopefully will create a great environment made up of professionals benefiting from each other. Alongside this, we have online booking for desks and meeting rooms, freelance resources on hand, training opportunities, apprentice scheme support, and access to our community manager, who will be the first point of call for anyone in the office with questions or issues regarding Digi-Cluster Prime. Next slide. So we have a good list of amenities, including high-speed secure Wi-Fi, fully equipped kitchen, free car parking spaces, free tea, coffee and a beer fridge, games, piano and a commercial coffee machine, as well as restrooms and chill out areas. We'll be adding more amenities and facilities as time goes on, so watch this space. Next slide.
Cool. So here you can see some of the pictures we took not long ago of our amazing office space. This includes the meeting rooms and our very trendy staircase. And some of the meeting rooms are available for hire. These offices are located in Kings Langley, Hunton Bridge in the old schoolhouse. And it's easily spotted by the large purple door at the front of the building. Just go back a slide. In the next slide, which is the previous slide, we'll play a video tour so everyone could get a better idea of the look and layout of the building. Hopefully it works.
Fingers crossed.
Or we just get the music. Cool. So I hope you could all see that tiny square of the video that we just had. So now that everyone knows, oh wait, sorry. As mentioned, the Digi-Cluster office spaces are located in Kings Langley, Hunton Bridge in the old schoolhouse. It's just off the M25 and we're just a short walk away from Kings Langley station. Next slide, please. So now that everyone knows a little bit more about what Digi-Cluster is and where we're based, I'll hand you over to Hannah, who will tell you a little bit more about the different packages we have on offer.
Yep, so we have multiple packages available to purchase. Our first package includes access to a group chat with other members, allowing you to chat, give feedback, advice, and collaborate. You'll also get access to all the Digi-Cluster events as well. From £79 a month, we can offer you a desk space at our offices. And for the same price, you can opt to have access to the WhatsApp group and Digi-Cluster events. Next slide, please. So we offer a range of desk plans to suit your needs, including day passes and meeting boardroom hires. If you sign up within the first 2 months, we're offering a 30% discount for the whole year. Next.
So we've been posting on our LinkedIn page, so if you're not already, be sure to follow us. We've been posting updates on Digi-Cluster events, special offers, Digi-Cluster Prime, and conversations around workplace attitudes. It's a great place for you to connect with your fellow Digi-Cluster members. Next slide, please. We've also introduced an Instagram account which works as a hub for all information and updates you could need for Digi-Cluster and Digi-Cluster Prime. We'll add a link in the chat for you to follow. Next slide, please.
Here is a visual of our booking system. We use Office R&D. Through this, you can book a membership with us via our portal, which is linked across our socials. Here you can sign up and book a desk or WhatsApp plan. It's super simple, easy to use, and makes the booking process effortless. Next slide, please. And here you can also book slots for our meeting and boardrooms. These come at day and half-day rates.
Another important thing to mention, if you're an existing Digi-Cluster member, then you can claim 2 free Prime day passes and also a free half-day booking for our meeting room. So please, if you're interested in a taster, get in touch as you don't want to miss out on some free time. Next slide, sorry. So if you'd like to know more or are interested, please visit our website or email Lucy to book a tour of the office. To sign up now, head straight to our booking site all of the relevant links will drop in the chat now. Next slide. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions, come find us at the tables. And again, thank you for listening. We hope this is something you'll be interested in, and we look forward to hearing from you.
When you got somebody who was a little bit slow on pressing the buttons. Apologies, but we got there, and I think you got the message across really well. So listen, guys, if you are interested, we've had quite a bit of interest actually already, which is great. I think people are moving out of their offices a little bit more. Working from home is great, but maybe 1 or 2 days a week, just want to get out and hang out with some like-minded individuals. So that's what we've got going on here. We're also looking at doing a WhatsApp group, as the guys mentioned. We've had some success with the Digi-Cluster group. We really want to dial it up a little bit more. So if you're interested in joining and being part of that WhatsApp group as well, our idea is that people will be sharing ideas and news, but also collaborating. We often have websites and briefs that come through which we can't do. It'd be lovely to have a group of people we can pass those leads on to nice and easily. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of collaboration opportunities as that progresses. But yeah, well done, team. Thank you very much indeed. Great presentation. Indeed. Cool. Okay, so now is your time. We're gonna probably just go off of presentation mode for just a couple of minutes whilst we order some beers and pizzas. If you want to do that, and you'll be back networking at your tables for a short while, and then we will be introducing our main speaker for the event. Look forward to seeing you very shortly. Muted again. We have some delight on their way, and I'm looking forward to it. But now for the main event. We have a brilliant speaker for you this evening, the awesome Patrick Mulford, who, as I said, I've known for a year and a half now, and every time I've spent time with Patrick, I've been blown away by his insight and enthusiasm and wit and experience in a number of areas. Tonight he's going to be talking about social media and some of the history and human behavior and human behavioral science, which is fascinating, and also how that is going to be affected and has been affected by the pandemic. So there's a couple of photos of the brilliant Patrick Mulford. Patrick, over to you.
Right, is this working? Is everything working? Can anybody hear me?
I think so. I can.
We're all good. Awesome. I do feel as if I've been bigged up way too much. I hope that you'll find some of this interesting. I do think that it's probably one of those presentations that's best listened to drunk. So beer, wine, vodka, absinthe, all good. Any of those things will help you listen to me for the next 50 minutes. It's certainly a better presentation to present drunk, put it that way. So bear with me. This is the first time I've done a presentation on Remo. It's kind of weird talking to a screen rather than real human beings, but I guess over the last year we've all had time to get used to talking to a screen rather than a real human being. And to be quite frank, we were doing it way before this this virus ever took hold. I think the average person with a smartphone interacts with their phone 2,617 times a day. That's clicks, swipes, taps. Your poor fingers, it's constant. You're constantly interacting with the screen and not interacting and connecting with the world around you. And a lot of that time is spent in social media. And that's something that I've been fascinated with for a long time. As someone that's fascinated with human connection and the way that humans express themselves creatively, both on and offline, social media is a great place to people watch. At this moment, my screen isn't working, but I'll fix that. Here we go. So at this moment, I think we can all agree that social media is a bad thing, right? There's been enough reports that have been done now and that have been published that have said that excess social media use leads to mental health issues, higher anxiety, feelings of loneliness, feelings of FOMO, cyberbullying's a problem. Then you've got the algorithms and the micro-targeting. It doesn't really matter whether you're a big fan of Brexit or Donald Trump or not. I think we can all agree that micro-targeting had a massive impact on the success of those campaigns. And the way that society is being polarized by algorithms is something that a lot of people are very worried about at the moment. And then there's the fact that everyone is completely absorbed with their phones. People are all looking down. They're not looking at the world around them. They're not interacting. They're totally absorbed. There was a report, some research that was done a couple of years ago that showed that you're almost 3 times more likely to be killed whilst taking a selfie because you're not taking notice of the world around you than you are of being eaten by a shark. So people are falling off of buildings, falling off of cliffs, walking in front of buses. And I think it was about 130 people in 1 year had died in a selfie-related accident, and less than 50 had died in a shark accident. So it's very, very dangerous. There are also ways in which social media can be positive, however. Arab Spring, for instance, it was almost completely instigated on Twitter. And then you have movements like the Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter. These are movements and causes that are predominantly promoted and shared on social media. And that extends to charities as well. When you think back to the Ice Bucket Challenge, and NGOs around the world are saying that social media is now the main way that they're spreading word of disaster and raising money for disaster relief around the world. The other thing with social media is that it does lead to some form of connection and comfort, especially in times when we're locked down and we don't have an opportunity to talk to one another in person. It does enable us to continue to be connected. And we've seen that over the last year. There's been a 10 to 15% rise in social media use. And I think 46% of women and 41% of men have said that they've been using social media more than before. Now, if you want to understand what's going on in social and how it works, you first have to understand what social media is. And there's this misconception that social media networks are a technology, that they are a technology platform. There's another misconception that it's a marketing platform, especially in a lot of our lines of work. We think that it's a mechanic for reaching people with marketing messages. Neither of those things are true. Social media is an ecosystem. It's a complex colony of 4 billion people interacting with one another and sharing ideas and information and stories about the things that have meaning in their lives. If you look at I think there's 7 characteristics of human life, and it's what biologists and scientists use to gauge whether something is a living organism. And those 7 characteristics map very, very closely with the characteristics and the behavior of a social network. I'll talk about that a little bit more a little bit later on. I won't delve into it too much, but I just want you to think about the fact that this is an organic system. It's people interacting with one another predominantly. There's brands in there, there's companies in there, but really it's people sharing, and it's a living thing. But the next thing I really want to talk about actually is something completely different. I'm really interested in a murder that happened a very long time ago in the Austral Alps on the border between Austria and Italy. And I just wanted to talk about that for a little bit. In 1991, there was 2 climbers and they were walking across a ridge between the border, and they stumbled upon a pretty gruesome finding. There was a human corpse, and it was exposed. The sun was melting the snow, and it exposed the back of someone in the ice. And they assumed that this was probably a hiker or a skier or a climber that a few seasons ago had lost their way and had been stuck up there. And so they marked the position and they went down the mountain, and they went looking for the authorities, the police, and they told them about it, and everyone went up there to recover the body and identify who it was. When they got up there, things were not quite what they were expecting, because around the body they found some really strange, interesting items. There was an axe head, there was arrowheads, there was very, very strange pieces of clothing and cloth, and the body was essentially naked. And they realized that this body was probably older than they thought. This is where you need a drink, because I'm going to show you what it looked like. Sorry about that. This is Otzi the Iceman, and he was a lot older than they first thought. He's actually 5,300 years old, and he's the world's oldest wet mummy. And he's actually a really, really interesting guy. He's got 61 tattoos on his body, and each of them were put at places where he was suffering from joint strain. He was in his 50s, and he was suffering from a lot of joint strain, and they'd been practicing acupuncture on him. And this was 2,000 years before the Chinese invented it. So he's kept on ice in he's a Bronze Age man, and he's kept on ice in the South Tyrol Museum in Bolzano. And every few years they defrost him and they perform lots and lots of tests on him. And every time they do tests, they find out more information about him. For instance, he actually was running away when he ran up that mountain. Someone had shot him in the shoulder with an arrow, and he was running from them when he collapsed with exhaustion at the top of the mountain. I've got a nicer picture of him. Here he is. This is a waxwork version of him, which has been created using 3D scans. They've also done his DNA now. It turns out that he had blue eyes, that he was lactose intolerant. So we know a lot more about him as a person. But what do we know about his social network? You know, people have had social networks long before Facebook. So Facebook's only 17 years old. So Otzi's social network, what do we know? Well, the best clues we have. So if we take his brain out, we see that it's exactly the same size as a normal human being. It's average in size. And this means that he probably had between 150 to 180 social connections. That number is called Dunbar's number, and Robin Dunbar is an evolutionary psychologist who he had a theory which he used monkeys and primates around the world to prove this theory. And his theory was that if you weigh a primate or a monkey, and then you weigh the size of its brain, there's a correlation, the size of its brain in comparison to its body and the size of its social network, if you count the amount of monkeys it hangs out with. If you extrapolate that data and you apply it to human beings, you find out that the average human being will have 150 to 180 close social connections. This is people you know, people that you interact with, people at work, people at school, people in your family, your friends. And so Dunbar then looked at historical communities, and he found that it didn't matter whether it was a medieval village or a Hutterite community or a Neanderthal village, or even things like Roman military units. Human beings have always gathered in groups of between 150 and 180 people. Now, if the group grows beyond that, what tends to happen is the group fragments, and the village breaks into two villages, and the people then start again and grow to 150, 180. The same thing happens with towns and cities. When they get to a large size, they either fragment, or in the case of cities, you have to bring in more formal lines of communication and more formal ways to organize the group. Dunbar's number is used in organizations all around the world, where if you're trying to create a dynamic team and a dynamic company, you generally try and keep the number lower than about 50 or 60 people, because after the friends and family are taken into account, you don't have enough opportunity to have a close connection to your work colleagues over that number, and the dynamic breaks down. And that's why in large organizations, there's much more formal intranets and ways of communicating with one another. Of course, Dunbar went to Facebook and he talked to Mark Zuckerberg about his theory, and Mark Zuckerberg laughed at him and said, yeah, right, Facebook's got like, the average person's got 1,000 connections, 2,000 connections. We've got people with 5,000 connections. This number makes no sense whatsoever. But when Dunbar analyzed the close connections that people had within their Facebook network, he found that the same thing applied. It was still 150 to 180 people that you were close to. So the big question is why? Why are we hanging around in groups of people and socializing? What's the benefit? Well, there's really 4 benefits over and above the fact that it's easier to bring down a woolly mammoth in a group than it is doing it on your own. The first thing that being part of a primitive social network would have helped you with was it helps to frame your reality. It helps you to understand who you are as a person. It helps you to understand your identity. And if you look at all of the artwork around the world from primitive societies, I mean, this is a cave painting in France, but it doesn't matter whether that cave painting's in France or in North America, South America, anywhere in the world, all of that art tended to focus on 3 facets of reality. The first one was, it was a way of describing your life, where you lived, who you lived with, what you hunted, who you chased, who chased you. It was basically a way of decorating, cataloging what your life was and what your reality was, so that that framework was documented. The second thing, there was creation mythology. A lot of this artwork talks about where we come from, where we go, where we die, what pushes the daisies up, where the sun goes when it sets. And the third thing is that all of this art all had a fascination with sex and reproduction. That's another thing that human beings seem to have been obsessed with for thousands and thousands of years. The second thing that social networks are very important for is conversation. We're social animals. We love to interact with one another. It seems to be something that's very, very important and vital, and a vital part of being human. Some of those conversations revolve around vital pieces of information that have to be shared with the entire tribe. And that's where stories come in. We've always been storytellers. Stories have always been a component of what it is to be human. We even dream in stories. If you think about what happens when you go to bed and you start dreaming, it takes story form. And stories have always been the way that we've passed on vital pieces of information for 3 reasons. Firstly, they're compelling. If you tell a story well, and people always try and tell a story by arranging the facts in the order that evokes the greatest emotional response, it means you've got someone's attention. You've got them gripped. Like, they're not going away. They're there. They're with you. They're listening. The second thing is that stories make complex pieces of information more palatable and easy to understand. So some of these concepts would be something that's quite complicated in its own right, but when you turn it into story form, into a parable, it's something that people can conceptualize and understand. The third thing is it makes those facts more memorable. So if you give them the cold hard facts, there's a good chance they won't remember it. Turn it into a story, it's something that people remember. So whether it's religious tenets, the code of conduct within a village, creation mythology, all of those things, or when it's stories of daring do or trivial matters like gossip, we always tend to place vital pieces of information in a story form. And those 3 elements come together at the end and enable people to validate their identity, because what you can do is you can behave within your network in a certain way, and you can send a signal out, and then those 3 things will give you feedback as to whether the way you're behaving is good and whether it's right for your particular culture, and that validates your identity, and it reinforces your sense of belonging within your community. So I first visited Otzi in Bolzano probably about 12 years ago, when I had a pretty unhealthy fascination with tattoo art at the time. I wasn't interested in getting any tattoos myself. I was just fascinated in why people had them in the first place. What is so vital about a certain piece of information, a specific facet of who you are as a human being, that you want to mark your body permanently with that fact. So I was traveling around the world, exploring different cultures, talking to different tattoo artists, the people that they tattooed. And at one point I ended up in Borneo, where a lot of tattoo art originated. And I was looking for a tribe that has now all but vanished, called the Kayan, and they were one of the first originators of tattoo art in Southeast Asia. And while I was there, I visited a longhouse in Sarawak in Southwest Borneo, and I talked to this guy who's a headhunter. The longhouse communities have about 20, 30 families all living in one very, very long house, as the name suggests, and each of them have the skulls of their enemies hanging in front of their houses. All of the older generation, the younger generation now have dragons and lions and those kind of things, but the older generation still have their traditional tattoos. And an anthropologist will tell you that every single one of these tattoos means something. It documents who this person is in his society. There's tattoos that tell you what tribe he's from, what longhouse he's from, how senior he is in the tribe, whether he's a father, a hunter, a headman in the village, how many heads he's cut off. And so I asked the translator to ask him what his particular tattoos meant. And he turned around and he said, well, a lot of them mean something, but a lot of them, my friends were getting them and they look cool, and I decided I wanted to get them myself. That's what he actually said. So it just shows that even in traditional societies and arguably in primitive societies also, they were subject to peer pressure the same way that we're subject to peer pressure today. So the question I had was, are there other similarities between traditional cultures and social media and the social networks that we're so fascinated with today? I was looking through the microscope the wrong way round. It's us that have similarities with primitive society, because we're a lot more like primitive societies than we think. I said earlier on that Otzi was lactose intolerant. Well, 20,000 years ago, everybody was lactose intolerant. You have an enzyme in your body that enables you to process milk, and you only need it as a baby, or at least 20,000 years ago, you only needed it as a baby, because the only milk you'd be drinking was human milk, and once you've been weaned, you didn't need that enzyme anymore. But then as human beings started to keep goats and sheep and drink milk from domesticated animals, people started to that gene started to mutate, and people started to keep the enzyme for longer. Today, when you look at lactose persistence, the ability to drink milk, at least into old age, when we tend to lose that enzyme again, 90% of Americans and almost as many Europeans are lactose persistent. And that's one of the only examples of evolution over 20,000 years. Now, technology is evolving a lot faster than we are. And that means that from an intellectual standpoint, I can adapt intellectually to use technology and adapt intellectually to the modern world around me. But from an emotional standpoint and from a physiological standpoint, I'm not Bronze Age, I'm still in the Stone Age. As is everybody else. So if you start looking at some of these primitive behaviors and instincts, you can start seeing why we do some of the weird, irrational things that we do in social media. Of course, there are a lot of things that have changed in the last 20,000 years. A lot of things have changed in the last 100, 200 years. Two things in particular have had a massive impact on the way that our social networks are constructed and the way that our cultures develop and receive signals. The first thing was industrialization. As people started to move away from those villages and move into the cities, as I said before, for the first time in history, you didn't really know anybody. You only knew a few people. And so that has an impact in the way that your social network is constructed. If you look at this diagram, this is Facebook. This is 10 million social connections on Facebook. And as you can see, it looks like a flight map. People aren't together anymore. People are spread out all over the world. And if you think about your particular social network, those 150 people that you know, they're probably not in a 5-mile vicinity anymore. They're probably spread around the world. The second thing that happened after World War II, and it was the first thing that had happened in the history of human beings. And that thing that happened was teenagers. That was a phenomenon that had never happened before. Years ago, what would have happened is that your identity would have mostly been shaped by your family and your immediate community. If you came from a community where your father was a butcher, or you were a farming community, or you worked down a mine, what would probably have happened is you'd have moved into the same industry as your family or your close network. You would have worn the same dress as the people around you. You would have expressed yourself in a very similar way to the people around you. There wasn't much opportunity for self-expression. There certainly weren't shops that would enable you to represent yourself in lots of different ways. After World War II, the teenagers had more freedom and more time to be a subgroup in their own right. Before then it was children, and then you become an adult. And what happened is they started expressing themselves in the form of quite strange and irrational subcultures: hippies, punks, mods, rockers, emos, you name it. There's so many different subcultures. They've exploded as the years have increased, because obviously we now know we can capitalize on it and sell people the things they need in order to identify with a particular subculture. Subcultures aren't just about clothing, they're about music, they're about modes of transport. If you look at mods and rockers, you wouldn't be seen dead on anything but a specific mode of transport. A lot of subcultures even have their own dialects. So this is a way of expressing your identity as something completely independent from your parents and unique to yourself for the first time in your life. BuzzFeed's founder, Jonah Peretti, coined the phrase postmodern schizophrenia for the age that we live in, which is an age where you don't just identify with one culture, you can identify with any number, even on one day. In the space of one day, I could be a professional, a father, a biker, a runner, a surfer. Every single one of those subcultures, I mean, just motorbikes in and of themselves, depending on what bike you ride, means you will identify with a particular motorcycle and wardrobe and music choice. There's an entire subculture that comes within the subculture, let alone all those other choices. So you're constantly expressing yourself to be part of a subculture and then sending out signals in order to receive validation from people. So that's what's happening in this big moving cluster. This is actually Facebook. This is a computer-generated model of Facebook. The bright nodes in that network are the most followed entities within Facebook. They're the big brands, the big celebrities, the big influencers, and all of those lights are the connections and content moving backwards and forwards. This is a completely fluid, unpredictable, organic organism, and no one person is in control of that network. You're completely at the mercy of the particular peccadillos of all of those people within there. So the big question is, social media, why do we use it? How do we use it? What is the point of social media for the average human being today? Well, the first thing we're doing is we're framing our reality. If you look at your feed, if you look at the things you connect to, it gives a pretty good profile of who you are and your interests and your cultural choices as a person. A really good way to explain this is if you look at a bedroom wall. As a teenager, I think all of us had a bedroom wall that we'd pin photographs and posters to. It would be, I don't know, a big poster of a sports car or your favorite football team or a band that you followed. You'd pin photographs of your friends to it. Maybe there'd be some photos of your family. Well, social media is the new bedroom wall. It's the place we identify with the things that have meaning in our lives. Influencers play a big part, as do celebrities. Some of the places that we're interested in, places that we live, places we want to go, arts and entertainment properties. Our friends feature heavily, so does our family, as do affinity groups, from sports clubs to religious organizations to lots and lots of different interest groups that we may be interested in. Brands, if a brand represents a set of values that you connect to, then a brand may be there as well. Of course, the way we represent ourselves and frame our reality on each network is different depending on the network. So Facebook has become the very, very generic social network where you put kind of a personal but very generic profile. It's skewing more heavily to an older generation now, and the young aren't using it as much. LinkedIn is a very, very different profile. It's how I would wish to be perceived professionally. TikTok, it's you in the moment. It's kind of an entertainment platform. It's a way of expressing yourself creatively. Pinterest is still going strong. I haven't used it myself in about 10 years, but apparently people are still there, and it's being used as a scrapbook of ideas and aspirational aesthetics. Instagram has become a little bit more generic these days. It used to be a representation of your idealized life. Now with stories, it's a bit broader, and there's a lot of self-expression happening there. The point is that every single network has a particular reason for being. That's how that network managed to get a footing within the few social networks that have gained mass adoption around the world. The second thing that we're doing in social networks is talking to one another. It's a forum for conversation. So when the internet was first conceived, it was utilitarian in nature. It was a way of giving people information. And but the other thing that happened was that it became a free and convenient way to talk to people at a time when normally it would cost you money if you wanted to talk to someone on the phone. And people still communicate on social media to this day. In fact, social media is the primary way that people express themselves, believe it or not. It's not face-to-face. It's not talking to one another. Social media gets the lion's share of the communication and expression for human beings right now, at least with those 4 billion people that are on those networks. But it's a closed loop. There's not many ways in which brands or marketers can get involved in those conversations. It's normally one-to-one or within closed networks of friends. The third thing that we're using social media for is storytelling. It's a platform for storytelling. Make no mistake, every single post that you ever post on a social network is a story, no matter how small. A few years ago, Ernest Hemingway was with a bunch of friends. I imagine he was probably in a bar. And his friends challenged him to write a story in 6 words. And so Hemingway went away, probably had a few drinks, and he came back and he said, "I've got it. Here's my story." And his story was, "For sale, baby shoes, never worn." And that's 33 characters. That's a story of 33 characters. A tweet suddenly seems really indulgent. To waste so many characters on your story, and a picture paints 1,000 words. So there's a lot more information that can be provided in a picture. That was a proverb, by the way, and again, that's another platform that's used for telling stories. Short form storytelling is vital information. So no matter what we're posting, whether it's a selfie, whether it's a meme, whatever we're posting is a platform for telling a story. Now, a lot of those stories are the rolling narrative of our lives. So social media has become the de facto way that we talk to people and we publish our life's moments. It's no longer a photo album that comes out at Christmas. It's social media on which we're documenting our lives. Of course, what we're documenting is not the boring stuff. And what we're documenting is not really reality. I mean, if you look at, these are some of the posts from my Facebook feed before lockdown, admittedly, and this isn't my life. This is a patchwork of images from my life to make my life look a darn sight more exciting than it is in reality. In reality, it's just as dull as everybody else. It's just as mundane. But I don't want to document that. I want to make myself look like I'm living a life of adventure. And this is why people post what they post. Some people post the mundane stuff as well, but the majority of us are handpicking and curating our feeds so it looks a lot more exciting. It kind of makes up for some of the dubious life choices that we've made in the past. Of course, there's only a finite amount of content that we can produce ourselves that's going to be interesting for other people. So we supplement it with much, much more content created by other people. And those other peoples are quite often brands. They're entertainment properties, they're memes. Memes are really fascinating. Memes are, they're like knock-knock jokes. They're a platform that someone else has invented that you can use as a platform for an idea that you want to send. And I'll talk about memes a little bit more in a minute. But a lot of this stuff comes from celebrities, a lot of it comes from influencers, and a lot of it comes from popular culture as well, the stuff that people are interested in at any given moment. It's stories that connect through a shared value that you share with your network. What's quite interesting, especially at the moment, is when you look at a virus. I've never been a fan of the name viral content. People tend to say, right, I want you to create a video and I want it to be viral. There really isn't such a thing as a viral video before the fact. You just do what you can in order to make it potentially viral, and then you just cross your fingers and hope that it is. When a piece of content is viral, it has a lot of similarities with a real virus. In fact, there's 5 conditions. There's 5 optimum conditions for a global pandemic, and they map very, very closely to a successful piece of social content. If you look at a virus, if it's a really powerful and deadly pathogen, it's got a lot in common with a really evocative story that captures the attention of somebody. Obviously, you need the optimum environment for a virus to spread. Well, as we said before, there's 4 billion users in social, and there's a culture of sharing. So people are spreading the story without really being nudged to do so. Seasonal conditions also play a part in how fast the virus spreads. So if you've got a meme that's culturally relevant, if you look at Bernie Sanders in his mittens, if you create a piece of content that rides off the back of the zeitgeist, then that cultural relevance is going to make that content spread a lot faster. Now, over time, people get bored of a piece of content. People build up a tolerance to it. This is the reasons that viruses mutate. The same thing happens to memes as well. Memes mutate over time, and that keeps them fresh, keeps them relevant, keeps them being shared, keeps them being spread. So the big question is, why are we doing this? And the reason is that we're all massively, massively insecure. We're all craving feedback and validation from people. You never, ever post a piece of content selflessly. You always do it selfishly. You always want to post in order to elicit response from other people. Otherwise, what's the point of doing it? And this is because we're all desperately scared of being socially excluded. It's part of human nature to be part of the crowd. There's a pioneering psychologist, psychotherapist actually, called Virginia Satir. She believes that every human being needs 8 hugs a day, 8 physical hugs a day, in order to remain emotionally stable. And kids need more. Kids need 16 hugs a day in order to emotionally grow. So just think about how many hugs you've had today and whether you've had your staple. And we crave that connection. There was a study a few years ago of high school shooters in America, and of the last 15 at the time, only 2 hadn't been socially excluded. We feel it activates the same areas of the brain that feel pain when you're socially excluded and socially isolated from a group. So we're all looking for reassurance. This is the Like a Hug jacket, which was created by MIT Media Lab in 2011, and it's a physical jacket with like inflatable bellows, and it's connected via Bluetooth to your phone. And whenever anybody gives you a like, it inflates and it gives you a hug, because whenever you get a like, a comment, a share from your social network, it is like a virtual hug. When someone likes your content, it reinforces your sense of belonging within your social network. And it's addictive. Validation is extremely addictive. Again, this is an evolutionary, it's in our DNA. And we're through evolution, we've been hardwired that way. Again, so that we stay together as a pack. Every single time anyone validates you by liking, sharing, commenting on one of your posts, it releases dopamine into your system and you feel good. And dopamine is highly addictive, so it has you coming back for more every time. The great thing about social media is it gives you time to edit the persona that you share. So in real life, you only get one chance, and if you mess it up, you've blown it. Whereas you can take 100 selfies. I think the average person, I can't remember, I think the average person takes about 10 selfies in order to post one. And obviously there's loads of editing functionality on your phone that enables you to curate that image to send out exactly the signal to your social network that you want to send. If you look at selfies, almost all selfies, they're there to express a single facet of your identity, whether it's I'm attractive, whether it's a funny selfie, you might be somewhere really exotic and you're taking a selfie that's really about the background. I mean, it might be something to do with you being desirable. That might be why you're sending a selfie, but people really want to ensure that people perceive them the way that they perceive themselves. And we're all really worried that people's perceptions of us is different from that. So selfies is a really, really good way of making sure that the person that people see is the person you want them to see. Again, people are looking for feedback through this process. Oh, I'm going to play that again.
Tell me I'm pretty! Tell me I'm pretty! Tell me I'm pretty! You're pretty? Say it again!
You get the idea. But every time you post something, it's an act of bravery. I think everybody has posted a piece of content thinking everyone's going to love this. And they've posted something they thought was edgy or cool, and everyone was going to love it. And then about 30 minutes later, you check back on your feed and you find out that no one said anything and you've got no response whatsoever. You get cold feet and you pull the content. It's exactly the same as telling a joke. So what are we going to go for? Okay. What kind of cheese do you use to hide a horse? Mascarpone. Now, the beauty of Remo is I have absolutely no idea whether people found that joke funny or not. If you found it funny, then it's reflected favorably on me. I look like a marginally funnier guy than I did before. Maybe you found that joke so funny, I'm making massive assumptions at this point in time, that you decide to share it yourself because you think that there's a value in telling that joke that will make people, that will reflect favorably on you when you tell it as well. Now, if you groaned, if you thought it wasn't funny at all, if you didn't get it, then my story just bombed, and it's reflected badly on me. And it's exactly the same process that happens when you share content. And that's why people rely upon memes so heavily, because a meme has already been, it's a bit, as I said, it's a bit like a knock-knock joke. People have already used that as a platform to share that piece of information. So it's already been kind of pre-validated. There's an insurance policy attached to it. So when you share the piece of information you want to share, it could be an animated GIF, you know that people already approve of that platform, and there's more chance that they will approve of the story that you're telling. Within this network, we're also very, very easily influenced. There was a piece of research that was done in 2008 by Leeds University, and they put 200 people in a room and they told them to just walk around randomly, just walk around in all different directions, do whatever you want. So people started walking around randomly, bumping into each other. It was all very, very confusing. But unbeknown to 190 people in that room, 10 of them had been told to walk in a clockwise direction. And within a few minutes, everybody was walking in a clockwise direction. Now, that's marginally interesting in itself. However, the really interesting thing is the fact that when they interviewed those 190 people afterwards, the majority of them believed it was them that came up with the idea of walking around in a clockwise direction. Hence the power of influencers and the rise of influencers as the popular kids of today. And popular kids are really fascinating. Popular kids have been around for a very long time, and they're an evil but interesting component of society. A popular kid is something that happens to all children around the age of 11 at school. When they first start becoming culturally aware and aware of their position in society and in culture, these rankings establish themselves, normally in the classroom. The 10% of kids in school are popular kids, as defined by mass media. So mass media will say, hey, this is cool. This is our perception of beauty. This is our perception of athletic prowess. These are the clothes that are cool at this moment in time. And money's always in fashion. So if you're rich, then you've got a leg up as well. And that enables about 10% of every single classroom to be a popular kid. Below them, there's another 10%, which are the wannabes. Sometimes it's up to about 15%. These are the kids that have almost got what it takes, but are missing something, but they're desperate to be those popular kids. They're always trying, but they never quite get there. At the bottom, you've got 10% that are socially excluded based on the fact that they do not possess any of those qualities that are dictated by mass media. These kids are the ones that tend to be bullied. They're the ones that are excluded, and it's really, really sad. In between, the rest of the kids, strength in numbers, right? So they align themselves with particular subcultures, whether it's football, whether it's a particular band or a particular fashion. You've got the kids that are into gaming. You've got the kids that are into music, or the emos, or the goths, or whatever their subcultures are. They cluster around a particular culture, and that's how they form their identity. It's been the same worldwide for hundreds and hundreds of years, until very, very recently. About 3 or 4 years ago, I identified that Venice High in Los Angeles, among about 3 or 4 other high schools within Los Angeles, are some of the first high schools ever to not have popular kids. They still have cheerleaders, they still have a prom queen, they still have a quarterback, but they don't necessarily have a hierarchy based on that. The hierarchy and the popular kids are outside of the school. The reason for this at Venice, and it's ironic that it's Venice, because Venice was Rydale High in Greece. They actually filmed Greece in a real high school, and that was Venice. Venice is in a very, very creative cultural melting pot on the west side of Los Angeles, and very, very close to the entertainment business. The kids there are very diverse, and they come from from very, very diverse backgrounds. There's a lot of rich kids, but there's a lot of poverty there as well. What they all have in common is that they have access to technology, and they also have access to a lot of places where influencers hang out. So if you're into rap, or if you're into sneaker culture, you'll go to Fairfax and you'll hang out with the real, like the rich kids of Instagram, or the celebrities, or the gangster rappers, whoever it is that you follow online, you can follow them. And they're a darn sight more attractive than those kids in your school. So for the first time, social media, as well as being well connected to a very creative culture, has enabled the death of the popular kid within the school. But something else is happening within that little petri dish as well, which is probably even more seismic. As I said before, lots and lots of close cultures all around the world, 150 people living in a village. Close culture is the way that people have lived for a very, very long time. You didn't really have access to the wider world apart from in media. And whoever controls the message, whoever controls the media controls the message. So mass media was what informed everybody in these close cultures as to what was culturally appropriate. That was before we had access to the internet and access to social media. That allows all of those close cultures to share notes. Suddenly everybody can compare and contrast, and also filter all the messages and decide which ones that they like. You know, not mass media. We're going to start deciding what's cool and what's hip and what we're interested in and what we want to hear. So for the first time ever, it's crowd culture that are informing mass culture. And they can do it a lot faster and a lot more effectively than mass culture ever could. But the interesting thing is that this enables a lot of those small groups of subcultures within close culture to gain critical mass and become a deep culture. And a great example of that is gaming culture, where, I mean, when I was at school, the gamers, they kept themselves to themselves and they weren't particularly cool. They certainly weren't aspirational, but crowd culture has enabled all the gamers to connect. And now the biggest influencers in the world aren't the rich kids getting onto Learjets, it's gamers. It's people playing games in their bedrooms and making millions and millions of dollars. So deep culture has enabled people to crowdsource the value sets that are actually relevant to them, rather than the things they've always been spoon-fed by Vogue. So it's a really, really interesting development, and something that has a massive impact on culture moving forward. So time's moving on and I'm hyperventilating. So without further ado, seeing that all of us, or most of us, work in industries where we come into contact with brands and companies that want to market themselves. The big question is, where do brands and companies sit within social media and in social networks? What part do they play and what relevance do they have? And the answer is they don't really. 74% of all brands could disappear and consumers wouldn't even care. Even if you're a trusted brand, you can disappear off the shelf and people will move their allegiance to another brand. You really don't factor in someone's culture and in someone's social network unless you stand for something more than that. And that thing that you need to stand for is a value set. People really don't care about brands. They only care about what those brands, sorry, I'll start again. People don't really care about brands. They only care about the values that those brands represent and how those values help them to express themselves and also share content with other people. So if we look at that happening in real life, if you're a brand and there's a set of values that your brand stands for and a consumer identifies with those values, then they might affiliate themselves with your brand. They'll connect to you, they'll follow you, they'll be interested in the messages that you're publishing. That doesn't necessarily mean that they'll engage with the content. If you look at a brand like Apple, Apple is one of the most valuable brands in the world, but for a very long time, they had absolutely no presence in any social network. They didn't publish any content whatsoever. Facebook thought that was very weird, so they set up a generic Wikipedia page for Apple, and about 48 million people followed a generic Wikipedia page with no chance of ever getting or receiving any content for them whatsoever. There was no value in connecting to the Apple's page other than identifying with that brand as a way of adding to your profile as a person. A few years ago, I worked with H&M, who were the most followed brand in the world. No one engaged with their content. Their content engagement levels were very, very low. And that's because they were just basically marketing to people. They didn't realize that H&M was one of the most valuable brands to their target audience. It was a great way for a young generation to have access to high fashion styles at price point they could afford. They were always in the stores. And so they connected with the brand, but the brand still marketed to them like they thought that they'd listen and engage with those messages, and they didn't. And that's because the content itself also has to provide messages and stories that are valuable to the consumer. And at that point, you will gain that engagement. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that they'll share those stories. I might be interested in train spotting. I'm not, but I could be. And I might follow a train spotting page. I might be highly engaged in train spotting content. However, if all of my friends would ridicule me for being a train spotter, there is no way I'm ever going to share any of that content. I'm only going to share that content if that content encapsulates a particular characteristic of value that I hold dear, that I believe my friends will also hold dear, that will resonate with my friends as well. And at that point, I will share that content. Again, I'll be sharing that content in order to receive validation of my identity. I'm looking for likes, comments, and shares. And the proof is in the success of particular brands in social media. These are some of the most successful brands in social. And as you can see, all of them represent a set of values and not a product. The interesting thing about Nike is that Nike football is followed more than Nike is. And that's because Nike is an important brand to its followership, but football's more important to them. Brands like Coca-Cola, their value set is so broad and universal that it appeals to everyone. I mean, Coca-Cola is all about friendship and happiness. Like, who's going to argue with that? If you create a brand around a value set that universal, you're going to capture a massive audience. Then you've got people like Disney. If you take all of their properties, their brand properties together, including Marvel and Star Wars, it's way over 1 billion likes. They've got a fan base that's well over 1 billion people, and there's a lot of duplication there. There's a lot of people following more than one property, but it just shows how powerful your brand can be in social media if you're a selection of values rather than a product itself. I mean, Red Bull is probably the perfect example. When you think of Red Bull, the first thing you think of is racing and Flugtag and people jumping out of spaceships, and the last thing you think of is an energy drink. Ronald McDonald's still terrifying. I'm not sure why so many people follow McDonald's, but there we go. So yeah, so social media is not going away. There are big issues with it. However, I do believe it's a necessary evil at a time where we are so disconnected. Nothing beats human interaction, however. So as we come out of lockdown, it's really, really important that we connect again in real life and we start hugging more. But if you ask me what social media is, I'd say that social media has become a surrogate for the traditional networks that have become fragmented and increasingly fragmented over time. And that's why we use it as such a crutch. There's been a lot of talk about the way that it's impacting people's mental health. So far, no one's done a study that's looked at how vital it has been as a support network also to people during times when we've been disconnected. So hopefully next time we meet, it will be in person. Hopefully this is the last time, even though Remo's been amazing, that we have to use it as a crutch. And look after your fingers, everybody, because they're really important and you're tapping way too much.
Brilliant.
Thank you very much.
Don't unshare your camera, because I realise that if I'm going to ask questions, hopefully everyone can hear as well. I'm going to have to use your microphone, and it's best to have the camera on you. Patrick, thank you so much for that. I'm always it's always wonderful talking to you and hearing you speak. I had to look up a word, peccadillos. I don't know what it was.
They're like armadillos, but they're smoother.
Apparently, it's a relatively small fault or sin. Yes, there are some questions. I'm going to try and do this in the sort of next 15 minutes, because I believe pizzas are arriving any second. Some of the questions from the audience, and moving on from one of the things you talked about, that you were just touching on. Do you think historians in hundreds of years' time will explore the DNA or build stories out of social media presence in the same way that they have mummies? So if you want, you can also look in the Q&A.
I've just switched it on.
Okay.
Sorry.
So do you think historians in hundreds of years' time will explore the DNA or build stories out of our social media presence in the same way that we have done for mummies?
I mean, I think from a DNA perspective, technology will ultimately, I've seen a number of projections of how people's fingers and people's eyesight and the way people's physiology will change based on their computer use and their technology use. So it's definitely going to if we do it long enough, and actually I take that back, because I think Elon Musk will have a brain implant in all of us soon, so we won't have to use our fingers to work our devices. But I think from an evolutionary standpoint, historians will be looking back at human beings in many years' time, and what's happening now is going to have a fundamental impact on our culture and us as humans, hopefully in a positive way, based on the way that we can connect and kind of raise attention to some of the pressing issues around the world. Yeah.
And we'll still be probably getting tattoos because they look cool, rather than because they know anything in particular.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of conversation around at the moment about functional tattoos, tattoos with different kinds of implants, tattoos that allow you access to things. And there's already implants that allow you to switch on certain devices. People are implanting the keys to their motorbikes in their hand, so they no longer need keys. They just go up to the bike, sit on it, and touch their hand to the fuel tank, and it switches on. So there's going to be a lot more kind of art that is functional as well as art that's decorative.
Cool. And good question from Hannah. How do you think the power of influence will hold? Do you think the power of influence hold will change?
It's always changing. It has done for a while. There's initially influencers were celebrities, so no one realized they could be an influencer for telling stories, social stories in their own right. So the first big influencers were A-list celebrities, and they were bad at it. They were really bad at it. They couldn't tell stories very well. People tended to connect to them because they were famous rather than the stories they told. And then you had people understanding the dynamics of social and then capitalizing on it and becoming influencers. They were much, much more effective than celebrities. Celebrities are great for a billboard. You put a watch on them, put them on a billboard, and then there's a psychological connection between that product and fame and luxury and celebrity for anyone driving past and very quickly looking at that billboard. In social, they're very, very expensive. They tend to have pretty low engagement. There are some celebrities that are good at it and good at creating content, mainly because they have teams behind them creating that content for them. But really, it's social influencers that capitalized on that world because, firstly, they were cheaper. Secondly, they were a darn sight more accommodating, and they could create the content themselves without big teams. And they knew the kind of content that would resonate with their fan bases. And they'd work with a brand to create something that was true to the brand, but at the same time would resonate and get the fan base to react. Unfortunately, there was then a crackdown because a lot of brands were doing it. It wasn't subversive. There just wasn't any rules around it. So any influencer could say anything and promote any brand and get loads of money, and they didn't have to actually say that it was a sponsored post. In fact, at that time, I ran an experiment where I bought about 100,000 followers myself. And then what I did was this shows how corrupt and dodgy the industry was at the time when we did it as an experiment. I set myself up as an influencer. I posted loads of pictures of cars. I then took 10 of the posts, the top 10 posts, over the span of a month. And I then bought all of the engagement for them as well. And then on the last day, I submitted my profile to about 14 different marketplaces for influencers. And within 24 hours, Porsche reached out and said, we'd like you to drive around in one of our cars, capture content over a weekend, and we'll pay you, I think they were going to pay me about £2,000. And up to that point, I'd spent about £1,000 in the experiment building up to that point. The plan was to keep going, to take that money, invest it in more followers, more fake profiles, more fakeness, get up to 1 million followers and go for the big money, and then use that as a case study to say, right, there needs to be this needs to be policed. But really, the the influencer market at that point was the Wild West, and it's been more organized. A lawyer stopped me doing it, by the way. It was the lawyers that came in and said you can't do this anymore. But now it's self-policing, and it's toned down a bit. Micro influencers are being used a lot more because the smaller your fan base, the more highly engaged your small fan base is, if that makes sense. So it makes sense to go for lots and lots of smaller people with more engaged fan bases than a big person whose engagement rate is going to be a lot lower. But it's always evolving. It's a moving feast, and there's been a lot of development over the last kind of 2 years. And ultimately, a lot of those influencers want to be something else, and are using the influencer platform as a way to become a film star, a music artist, set up brands in their own right, become business people. They know that it's temporary, but at the same time, it's always going to exist. So it will continue evolving. People will always follow those popular kids, and luckily they're not in a schoolroom anymore.
Well, that leads very well on to Jen's question, saying, do you think that the concept of authenticity has become more powerful when it comes to social media and content?
Yeah, because it's, I mean, there's a lot of conversation around fakeness in social, and people putting up kind of false imagery, a false image of perception, a false perception of reality, something that isn't real and isn't sustainable. But really, social has proved that you can be yourself to a certain extent at the same time and post stuff that is authentic. There's been a lot of campaigns recently, and influencers have got involved. Everything from kind of wearing no makeup, showing your persona, warts and all, to kind of break out of those perceptions from the beauty industry. There's been a lot of campaigns that are purposefully rough and purposefully more authentic, and they resonate a lot with people. Ultimately, people follow most influencers, apart from the rich ones that go around the world and have that aspirational life. The reason that people follow influencers is because they're more real than film stars. Film stars are so polished and fake that they're great as kind of shining lights, something to pin up on your wall, but someone you follow every single day should be more real than that. And I think influencers are a way actually of getting to more real things, as well as the side of it that still is going to be fake and unsustainable and unrealistic.
Indeed, and I think there's one final question, looking at which is related to that. Has social media created a news industry that's driven by clickbait? And does this mean it'll be more challenging to understand the real world we live in?
Yeah, the news industry is a problem, and it's a problem because it's a bigger problem in other countries that don't have the BBC. I mean, the BBC is another conversation altogether, but the fact that we have a national news network, it kind of acts as an anchor to the rest of the news networks. If you go to countries like the US, where all news networks are commercial, there's a scramble the whole time to gain more followers. And you clickbait, it used to be an obvious ploy to gain your attention by someone that was kind of a little bit unscrupulous. It was like, this person did this, but you won't believe what they did next, or blah, 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 blah. You see that kind of clickbait tactic coming from a news network. Like, they're scrambling for your attention. All of it is kind of hysterical. All of it is manipulative. And it's really, really scary, because you see it more from the tabloids in this country than you see it from the news networks. But ultimately, it's social media is about gaining someone's attention, and you only have it for a few seconds and they're gone. And it's very, very kind of transigent. So clickbait, I think, is going to become a growing issue, because it's not just people that want you to trawl through images of celebrities as they look today with loads of ads around the rest of the page. It is news networks. I mean, CNN is just as bad as Fox News in the US, if you ask me, for trying to grab people's attention. You get to the bottom of the page, and half of the clickbait stories are actually CNN stories rather than clickbait stories that take you off to somewhere to look at pictures of puppies.
Yeah, indeed. Patrick, that has been brilliant. One final question for me. What was the other joke? So we had a groan from Georgia on the mascarpone joke. There were other jokes you were going to do.
So Lucy was my was my captive audience earlier. The mascarpone one won, but the other joke was, what's the difference between a hippo and a Zippo? And the answer is one's very heavy and the other's a little lighter. So that's the joke I spared you, but haven't spared you.
Which I really enjoyed, so thank you for sharing that. Patrick, big round of applause.
Thank you.
For sharing there. On the way out. Patrick, thank you again so much for sharing. It was a great talk, and I hope you all agreed. It was quite inspiring. Again, one of the concepts that I hadn't really thought of was that there is a new idea of teenagers that didn't really exist many years ago, until fairly recently. I'm thrilled that Patrick has joined CLOC as a ECD just in the last 2 weeks, which is fantastic news. And so hopefully he'll be joining us on more events, and you can chat to him on the tables afterwards. So our pizzas have just arrived. All that remains for me is to say thank you to more of the team. One other thing also, I must mention a big thank you to Ian Port for doing the video in the Digi-Cluster Prime one around our office. But I want to thank our 90-second pitchers, Lee and Emma. I really appreciate you getting involved. Our sponsors, VWV and Samantha and Zahir, for representing. I'd like to say thanks to Lee, Kia, Dan, Harry and Saffron from the Chamber. And Ines, sorry, you went on there, Ines. That was a typo from earlier. And George, Georgia, Hannah, Jade and Josh, who did a great presentation around Digi-Cluster Prime. And of course, Amy, Jen and Lucy for helping organise and making all this happen, and the guys at JB Cole. But most of all, thank you to Patrick, inspirational as ever. Now time for beers and pizzas. Thank you everyone. I'll see you on the table.